They don't want you to know the truth.
Hey, everybody out there. Thank you for joining us again at Disrupt the Chaos. We're going to be airing Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays at 7 p.m. For my Instagram followers, know that I wish I could talk to you, but we haven't figured out how to do all of this yet, but we will. And we're so happy. And in fact, Richie, I see you, my brother, Richie Reseda. Please Google who he is and the incredible work that he did around feminism while he was incarcerated. And he recently came out, and he's just an incredible person. So I'm to have him know that he's watching means a lot to me. So thank you for joining us. Yesterday's been a heavy day, and today it's just heavier, not only because of the pandemic that we're in, but because of the murder of George Floyd, which, as a journalist, I had to watch it. But me and Tondi, our executive producer, decided yesterday that we would not be sharing that video. I think that's up to people to see it if they want to see it, because I thought I had seen really bad police killings, and this one is just so horrific, everything around that. So I want to talk a little bit about George Floyd in a second. But I'm also, excited that we're going to be talking to the mayor of San Juan. She likes me to call her Yulín. I call her Mayor Cruz out of respect. And my mentor and so many things to me, Dr. Marta Moreno Vega. I mean, if you're doing any work around Afro-Latinx experiences, diasporic Blackness, and you don't know who she is, then you don't know what you're talking about. So I just need to make that very, very clear. So, look, as we come on air, there are over 100,000 people that have died in the United States. And while the epicenter remains in the Bronx, in New York City, the epicenter now is in the Bronx. And what people have to understand about a lot of the Bronx is the Bronx has some of the highest rates of asthmatic people, right? As well, it's poverty of work. It's a borough of working class people, middle class people, and to be born in the Bronx and to see 50 years later, my dad still has his business in the Bronx, we would do anything that we can. But right now, the epicenter of the epicenter is happening in the Bronx, right? And we have to figure out ways, especially in other boroughs, how we connect with organizations on the ground, mutual aid organizations that are doing the work, because the government never does the work for us, but it's getting hot. It's 92 degrees in Albany today, so I can't imagine what it's like in New York City right now. And we have another murder that we as a people, not just Black and brown, but particularly Black and brown people, have to now see. So what we want to say first is, to all the families, the loved ones, the partners, whatever relationship you've had with someone that has passed away. I was on a call earlier with Dorsey Nunn, who is an incredible just visionary around incarceration and how we support the families. But Asha Bandelli, who is a writer, a poet, a member of the Malcolm X grassroots movement, was on. And she was saying at the end of our call that we have to find a way to memorialize people. First, people who believe in remembrance or funerals cannot see their loved one. My uncle, Dumari, my titi, he passed away of natural causes, but because of the COVID-19 and coronavirus, his sons and daughters, my primos, weren't able to have what we would usually have as a family that's very steeped in Catholicism, right? Like a ritual and, praying with beads and everything that entails, So I can't imagine not only family not being able to see someone and hold them while they're passing, but then not be able to have any type of ceremony. So Asha said we have to find a way to remember. It has to be public, and we as organizers have to figure it out. So I said, let's work together, let's figure this out, right? And what I did tell Asha and the other people that were on this conference call was that in Puerto Rico, 6 months after the hurricane, there was a display in front of the Capitol in Puerto Rico of over 3,000 pairs of shoes, and if people couldn't get to the Capitol, they were doing their own remembrance ceremonies in the municipalities in Puerto Rico. So we have to figure out a way to do this, right? So I already see that I'm going to call her Yulín because she wants me to call her that. But like I said, she's the mayor of San Juan, and we're going to bring her up real quick. But we want to talk a little bit and show some footage of what has been going on with the murder of George Floyd and protesters yesterday and today. There are a lot of people out there. The incredible thing about organizers is we can shift to any situation. And I've actually been very glad to see that white people in particular have said, we're going to be on the front lines right now of this and protect other Black and brown people. And let me say something about Minneapolis, Minnesota. The fact that Amy Klobuchar is even being considered as a running mate to Joe Biden, that has to end now. A lot of us are not on the Joe Biden bandwagon. Luckily I'm in New York, so I'm voting for Bernie Sanders. He's on the ballot. I'm voting for Bernie because it's New York, and I know where New York is going to go democratically. But Amy Klobuchar needs to be taken out of the running right now. She was a district attorney for over 8 years in Minneapolis, and not one time did she ever choose to bring an officer who had killed people like Philando Castile or indict them. So when Joe Biden is trying to tell Charlemagne the God that he ain't Black if he ain't vote for him, Joe Biden should not get that vote if he picks Amy Klobuchar. I know that's not a popular thing to say, but she cannot be the vice president. So I'm going to say that today. And we have to have this historical memory, because if not, we think that this just happened. So, Tani, can we pull up some of the footage of George Floyd's family and some of the people that were out there protesting yesterday?
The Minnesota Department of Public Safety are investigating George's death. The 4 officers involved have been fired, which the mayor of Minneapolis said was the right call. But is that enough for your family, Philanese?
No, not at all. I love my brother. Everybody loves my brother. Knowing my brother is to love my brother. They could have tased him. They could have maced him. Instead, they put their knee in his neck and just sat on him and didn't care at all. He screamed, "Mama, mama, I can't breathe. I can't breathe." And they didn't care. So I just don't understand what more we got to go through in life, man. They didn't have to do that to him. He's a giant. He don't hurt anybody. He give his last to anybody. They didn't care. They treated him worse than they treat animals, and I wouldn't like that. They took a life, now they deserve life. I don't feel sorry for them. They hurt me and they hurt my family. I can't take nothing back. I can't get my brother back. They at home, they sleep, they with their wives, they got kids. If something like that happened to them, they'll be just like me. I just don't know what's going on now.
So firing them is a good start, but we want to see justice for our family. And we want to see them charged. We want to have them arrested. They need to be charged with, because what they did was murder. And almost the whole world has witnessed that because somebody was gracious enough to report it.
The connection, we lost it for a second. You said you want to see them charged. Did you say charged with murder? Is that what you said?
We want to see them charged with murder. And we want them to be convicted. We want them arrested. They need to pay for what they did. He didn't deserve what happened to him. And they didn't do anything to help him. They were supposed to be there to serve and to protect. And I didn't see a single one of them lift a finger to do anything to help. While he was begging for his life, not one of them tried to do anything to help him. That I didn't see. What I did see was murder. And that's what I want them to be arrested and charged and convicted for.
So that was George Floyd's family talking to Don Lemon. You know, and I think what is always important to remember is that there are families behind this. And in fact, in the police brutality movement in New York, particularly New York City, that I've been part of with so many of my comrades for over 20 years, our mentor, Richie Perez, taught us a very dear lesson, that you support the families and you support the families from the beginning to the end. You know, and there are protests happening right now in Minneapolis, but there are protests happening in New York City, in LA, and all over this country. And what this moment reminds me of is what Bree Newsome did. Bree Newsome was the sister that we saw over 3 years ago climb in the pole where the Confederate flag was flying in South Carolina. And what she said was, this ends today. And this has to end yesterday. We can no longer allow to talk about, or not allow, but really the point of reforming the police is over. We have to really think about abolishing a system that was based on capturing Africans who escaped a plantation. And we can't allow this, because if we continue to allow this, we are letting our children down, our grandchildren down, the children in our family. And be very clear that because of social media, all our children who are home in front of a screen have seen this. I had to have a conversation with my daughter, and she said, when will the world get better? We're in a global pandemic. Puerto Rico's still hurting. We have a virus and the police keep killing us. And, you know, it's just horrific. So we hope that everybody will support all the protests happening, and we'll talk about this in the narrative, or what they do as artists and poets and all of that. But I'm so happy right now to introduce the Honorable Carmen Yulin Cruz, the mayor of San Juan, Puerto Rico. She's gonna say, "Call me Yulin, Rosa."
That's right.
No. You come on. Look.
Let me tell you why
every title.
Let me tell you why I insist on people calling me Julie. And first of all, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for always being the voice of justice, and thank you for ensuring that voices that may not seem strong enough get a platform. I often get a little upset when people say, let's give a voice to the voiceless. Everybody has a voice. Some of us have a microphone in front of us. Some have larger platforms, but the woman that stands up on the PTA meeting demanding that her child does not get bullied, she's got a voice. The man that stands up on the street demanding that his or her son, they do not get stopped and frisked just because they look different, they have a voice. And having a voice sometimes is just putting up a sign that says, justice for George Floyd. It's as simple as this. Sometimes people think that having a voice means, being in a large platform and getting in the Time 100 list of most influential people, which I was honored to be on 2018. That is important because it gives you a different platform. because it raises the level of your platform, not because you gain importance. People are as important as the good they do for other people. But Yulín was my grandmother's nickname. Her name was Lutgarda. I often say with a name like that, you need a nickname. And she was the first one to learn to read and write in her home. A very poor woman. She crawled and clawed her way out of extreme poverty from the Guanica Central, which was when Puerto Rico was used as a plantation, mostly sugarcane plantation, to produce rum or just to sell and export. But there were things going on that were really painful. For example, there was a cyclone fence at the beach that would go not only on the sand, but inside the water, as if the water would not go from one side to the other. And on one side, Puerto Ricans would be allowed to bathe, and on the other side, Americans would be allowed to bathe. The houses of Puerto Ricans were painted a different color than the houses of Americans that worked at the Guanica Central. So it is my own homage to a woman that was small in size, but great in spirit, and that instilled in me the need to pay it forward. You have to pay it forward. You have to make sure that your life is as good as how many people you can pull towards you, not push away. So that's why plus I wasn't a mayor 8 years ago. I was a member of the House of Representatives. So 12 years ago, I wasn't a member of the political class, which I don't think I am still, because I seem to always go against the current. And at some point in time, I won't be. So I was Yulín, I am Yulín, and I will be Yulín.
And I got you, Yulín. My sister's name is Janita. So those Y's are extra extraordinary women. So look, we really don't know what's going on in Puerto Rico. And most of it is because of the U.S. nature of the U.S. press, and I read every article and I'm like, what is happening? Because if what is happening here in the United States that the president supposedly cares about, we already know how he has felt about Puerto Ricans when he threw paper towels at us, or he called you a nasty woman. And I truly believe that you're his nightmare every day, and that gives me a lot of good feelings at night. I'm like, oh my God, every day he's so angry at her. Yes. But can you tell us where we're at with COVID-19? Because all we really saw was the lockdown, the first lockdown within the United States and the territories, the colonies of the United States. Very broad. But post that, most that I have read is the fight to even get tests so that you can test people.
Yes. And one of the things that I think it's important, first of all, is to begin with that 100,000 number and understand that over 100,000 deaths in the United States is not simply a number. And today I was honored with Rolling Stones magazine, did an interview. And the title is, How Were Hurricanes Irma and Maria a Prelude for the Pandemic? Because really, President Trump and his administration exhibited everything they are doing now in Puerto Rico before. It was almost like a dress rehearsal of bad government. First of all, he didn't listen to the experts. He's not listening to the medical experts now. Secondly, he was tooting his own horn and spewing all sorts of misinformation. He has done that now, not only with how joyful he's been about the entire, oh no, we're doing a great job. I think he thinks if he repeats that enough, people will start feeling it. But there's a phrase that I used a lot, and you've interviewed me before, and we've been in Chicago before together, and in New York, it's, they didn't have to die. Those 3,000 people in Irma and Maria, in the aftermath of it, they didn't have to die. And that phrase is being used in the United States now. That 100,000 people plus did not have to die. And of course, you know, the virus is the virus. But when you take things seriously, then you can do better. And one of the main things that everyone heard was, oh, that Puerto Rico is doing one of the first lockdowns. It was true. But now the current Republican governor of Puerto Rico is kind of sleeping on those laurels. She does not have a plan for getting enough testing, molecular testing, which is proven to be the one that really tells you if you have, right now, if you have the COVID. She doesn't have a Puerto Rico tracing program. It took her weeks to begin to disperse the $1,200 that came from the federal government. As of today, the government admits that they have over 60,000. 60,000. 2 weeks ago, it was 130,000 unemployment applications still not being processed or filled. And in the midst of all of this, the only tool that she had at her disposal, because she wasn't doing a good job on every other area, the only tool she had at her disposal was the lockdown. She started reopening slowly, but faster than anybody thinks. The New York Times today puts Puerto Rico as one of the areas where the COVID is still increasing. And she did it because of financial pressures, because of economic pressures. And what is important to know is that, and you know this, Rosa, one of the things that in a crisis surfaces, like oil when it's in water, is that it is the most disadvantaged, usually African Americans and Latinos, people of color, that get screwed. I have to say it that way, that get screwed. Because right now, in the United States, disproportionately, African Americans are dying in New York and Chicago, Latinos in LA. And in Puerto Rico, what is happening is that it has been the municipalities are the ones that are taking charge. One of the things that we did, March 8th was the first case of COVID, suspected COVID, which on the same week, March 12th, was told that it was positive. On March 13th, I signed a $1 million contract with Quest Diagnostics, the laboratory, to have around 13,000 molecular tests provided to San Juan. And I started the first and most consistent drive-through in all of Puerto Rico. As of yesterday, yeah.
Yulin, let me ask you about that, because it's the first time I've heard the term molecular testing. Mm-hmm. I think what we've heard a lot in the United States is antibody testing. But yesterday in the Lancet, one of the medical journals I was reading said that 50% of those tests have a false positive. So when you say molecular tracing, what is that? I haven't heard that.
I'll do two things. I'm going to send you a video of what we've done in San Juan, so you can post it with your listeners and followers. But it is the one that they put a swab up your nose. It's similar to the one for the flu, the influenza, H1N1. And they do it. I'm not going to say it's painful, but it's very unpleasant and very uncomfortable.
Well, my husband got that. I just didn't know that was the name of it, because he's an essential worker. So he got tested with the swabs, and he said it was painful. Yeah.
It's testing with a swab. And it is important because this is what most people don't understand. There are very few things we know for a fact about COVID. But the one thing that we do know is that pretty much 8 out of 10 people could have it, and they don't know they have it. They have no symptom, thankfully. That's thankfully because they don't get ill, but they're passing it on to other people. Out of those 2 people, one may get somewhat sick, And there's one that can get moderately to severely sick. So we only do in San Juan the molecular testing. The other one is called serology testing, the rapid test. I'll give you 2 points of data points that you may have not heard in the States. One is yesterday, the government of Puerto Rico had to recall about thousands of tests, of rapid tests, the one that's not the swab, because it came out in a list that had not been approved by FDA. So as you know, the FDA said, oh, a lot of this can go on the emergency rapid approval, but it's not a final approval, so we're not sure if they were going to work. And as they have continued to gain access to data, they pull them out. They do a total recall. So we didn't have many of those, but the government of Puerto Rico said there's about 6,500 people that have already had the test. So if they had a test that was negative, they need to be retested. The government of Puerto Rico said that they were going to be testing every 50,000 people on nursing homes, and that it was going to take them 2 weeks. They haven't started. This week it came out, they don't have a plan. They're testing people at the airport, but they don't tell any of us, any of the mayors. They don't tell us where the people are going. So I don't know how many people that tested positive at the airport are coming to San Juan or going somewhere else. To give you an idea, in San Juan, we have about 482 up this way. 482. We're the municipality that has the most. But I don't know if the numbers that I have as a municipality are included in the health department. I don't know if the veterans numbers that go to the Veterans Hospital are included in that. So we basically have very flawed testing system on a Puerto Rico central level. Municipalities have done it, but not nearly as fast. You could have done a drive-through in each one of the senatorial districts in Puerto Rico, which are 8, and you could have moved this very quickly. But the government, what did they do? And you're not going to believe it, Rosa. They gave a $38 million contract to a company called Apex. It was a construction company that only 3 days before getting a $38 million contract had changed their purpose of doing business. They changed their purpose of doing business to looking at medical and pharmaceutical goods and services.
Well, listen, I believe it because, in covering and being able to follow you and your team when we went to Puerto Rico and at the protests as well in Puerto Rico, we know what Jose Joe did with that electrical grid for the 2 men in Minnesota, so, so are you saying that in Puerto Rico, there's not even a clear indication of how many people may be infected?
No, because the data that mayors have, those that have been able to put it together, because we have another virus in Puerto Rico, and I say virus, it's the Fiscal Control Board.
Yeah,
which is the
pre-existing condition to the condition.
Exactly, pre-existing condition to the virus.
Yeah,
and one of the things that happened is that most municipalities don't even have the money. They don't even know if they're going to be able to open next month, June. So those municipalities don't have the capacity to be able to do testing or tracking. In San Juan, we've been doing contact tracing or tracking since March 24th when we got our first positive. But a lot of other municipalities don't know. So supposedly the central government is calling them and telling them, you have X number of people at your municipality that have COVID. But first of all, are they COVID with the right type of testing or with the recalled tests? Number one. Number two, we were told at one point in time that we were going to get 1.5 million tests so that at least half of the population could be tested. That has not happened. So yes, in summary, we don't know at this point how many people have it. There is no plan, no central government plan, only municipal plans, which are not joined together, so they don't articulate a strategy. And in the midst of this, we don't even know, the government does not have a contact tracing policy at all at this point. On
So
top
when tourists, obviously, those of us who are Puerto Rican and the diaspora understand that most of our islands' economic system has been based in tourism and continues to be based in tourism, right? We heard about that the cruise ships were disembarking without giving you notice where they are, and that's your municipality. Where's Puerto Rico right now in terms of guidelines? Is there still a curfew? And are people wearing masks? And is there social distancing? What does that look like in Puerto Rico? Yeah. Also, because there's so many elders in Puerto Rico who were already like hit hard with the hurricane. But also, lastly, what does the hospital system look like if there was to be all of a sudden a surge of Puerto Ricans that were really experiencing the symptoms of COVID-19?
Let me take it step by step. You have to understand that in Puerto Rico, it's different. The ports do not report to the municipalities. They report to the central government, which should not be that way. That should not happen. But I have to say the cruise ship industry had a protocol. They had a protocol. And at some point, there was some miscommunication with the governor. It was the same protocol as they had in the States. But cruise ship has stopped for 60 to 90 days in order to make sure that it is safe for the people that travel and that everybody around the world can set up the standards. And one of the things that we're working on is in Old San Juan, which is a majestic place. Next year it'll be 500 years old. A lot of people go to Puerto Rico and they say, I've been to Puerto Rico when they've only been to Old San Juan. It's marvelous. You still have the original cobblestones and so forth. It is like walking through history. Some of it painful, some of it great, but history nonetheless. We are thinking of starting a pilot program of ensuring that people get tested every 2 weeks, because you can contract this virus very quickly, and you have to get tested. The central government has done this. We are still under curfew between 7 o'clock at night and 5 a.m. in the morning. Everything else has been relaxed. Restaurants, not bars, can open, but restaurants can open and sit 25% of the people that they would have their occupancy. They can sit them 25%. We have been teaching at the municipality all of our students through internet from March 16th, and we're going to graduate the 3 graduating classes. The rest of the schools in San Juan are controlled by the central government. And we have been giving food to people, everybody that comes through early Head Starts and Head Starts. And we also are giving, ¿cómo se dice? Compras. Cuando uno va al supermercado, compras. Groceries. We're giving people groceries. And today we started a program with our HIV patients and our trans population to give them also groceries for a month. And we give everybody groceries for a month on a weekly basis. So in terms of the tourism, we are developing a plan to start it and make sure that tourists are protected and our people are also protected. But instead, in terms of the hospitals, it's interesting. At the beginning, the medical task force that was named by the governor told us that we would need about 3,000 ventilators. There are only 800 ventilators in Puerto Rico.
Oh, wow.
And there was another situation of corruption where it appeared that they wanted to give a contract to a company where it would take more than 6 months to get ventilators into Puerto Rico. And the company was not a company that dealt in medical supplies. So that was another issue. See, corruption really steals from the people. And in this case, not only respirators, not only testing, not only contact tracing, but also the ability to stay alive. And when it was determined that we only had 800 ventilators, then we were told that we only needed 500 ventilators. So the truth is that if we have more than 800 people that need a ventilator, they're going to die. That's it. Or we're going to have to be making decisions as to who has a better chance of living and who has a better chance of dying. And nobody wants to be put in the position of playing God.
But that's the thing that, for me, we have to keep now tying what happens in Puerto Rico every time to our colonial status.
Yeah. No.
I mean, I truly believe if there was a Democrat instead of Trump or even a third party candidate, they would have done way more for Puerto Rico. But, if we look at any statistical report, if Puerto Rico were to be a state, which it's not going to happen for all the statehood is, that's not happening. At least not in my lifetime, because I won't allow it with many millions of other Boricuas, I'm sure. But we would be 51. Our poverty level would be, Mississippi is the 50th, and we would be 51. There were so many cuts happening before Maria, all the corruption.
There were cuts to pension.
Yeah. And this is why I want to ask you this, because, right, you're running for governor. And I think that's critically important right now. But I think there's been a couple of critiques, that I've read. One around potential gentrification that some people have said you have been part of. But what is your position at this point with Commonwealth status or independence? Because I know you're not a statehooder, and I think the diaspora needs to know these things so we can not only continue to support you, which, I'm not a journalist trained, I'm independent. I'm going to say my opinion of what I believe. I think you'd be a phenomenal governor because I think you would listen to people who want a complete and total independence and how that works, or how do we keep the status and not keep getting screwed over. But, what would you say to people who might not understand where you're at with your political position? But also, I don't think people are understanding the corrupt nature of Wanda Vasquez. I mean, I thought Jose Joel was bad, but she's been worse and kind of doing it under the cover of night.
Mm-hmm. Let me tell you 3 things. Number one, on the gentrification issue, on the contrary, I have been at the forefront of fighting for communities. Again, one of the things that we have to change is that in Puerto Rico, the mayor is not entirely in control of the zoning laws. So the central government can impose restrictions or open up the market that you don't want in your city. So that's number one. La gente del Caño para mí son especiales y se tienen que quedar en el Caño Martín Peña. That's number one. But number two is I don't believe in statehood. I believe in free association. Free association is let's say a marriage with a prenup agreement. I know what I'm getting and what I'm putting on the table. You know what you're getting and what you're putting on the table. And we both have to agree on what's going to happen. For example, the U.S. Postal Service that is coming under attack by President Trump. And I think we all have to fight that. The post office is a way for people to do a lot more than get a letter. People's livelihoods depend on many times on the U.S. postal workers. But we would not need a postal service. So we could use the US Postal Service. What do we need? We need, for example, to make sure that at the Dominican Republic, which is less than 80 miles from San Juan, very quickly they had the WHO, the World Health Organization, giving them testing. And there was a rumor, which was not confirmed, that this was offered to the government of Wanda Vasquez. And they said, no, that was never confirmed. But it is one thing that your neighbor has, and in 24 hours can get a test that will save their people's lives, and you cannot get it because you're waiting for CDC to give it to you. And that happened all across the United States. So that's one thing. During Irma and Maria, we were not allowed to buy lampposts or generators from countries that the US buy lampposts and generators.
Right.
We had to buy them from the US. So it imposes a lot on us that makes our life more difficult and makes our standard of living a lot more expensive.
Yeah, and for people who don't know, that's what the Jones Act is. And
yes,
when Hurricane Irma and Maria hit, there were countries all over, almost 100 countries that wanted to send in supplies and goods. When one of the hurricanes hit St. Thomas and the Virgin Islands first, it was Puerto Ricans who literally got on boats to take them supplies, and they wanted to help us, but they couldn't. So I think it's very important that people understand this colonial, it's not a relationship, it's a colonial domination that has on any type of not just independence for our people, but independence from a capitalist economic system that we're beginning to see finally really truly crumble. But I always tell people, if you want to see the beginnings of capitalism crumbling, look at 2008 recession, not through the United States lens, but through the lens of Puerto Rico.
The other thing is that it's very interesting. At some point, Puerto Rico made 13 out of the 21 medications most used in the world.
Right, the pharmaceutical company.
So we were a whopping pharmaceutical industry. The problem was this. Everything was put in the package. It was sent to the States. Some of it was taken off the carrier. Some of it came back. And when it came back, Puerto Ricans could not afford it.
Right.
Because it was so expensive. So that is the one thing. I believe that there should be, and one thing that people in the States have to understand, we know the difference between Donald Trump and the way he treated us, and the love and the embrace and the help and the solidarity of the people of the United States. We had 327 AFL-CIO workers getting here early October when the president of the United States was saying that the logistics were unsurmountable because we are an island surrounded by water, lots and lots of water, ocean water. No, that's not part of a skit from Saturday Night Live.
You're like,
that's from the president of the United States.
Right.
That's the same president that said to people that they should drink disinfectants. So it should not make us weary. You know, this guy is
surprised when he Well, Yulin, before we let you go, I did want to pull up a video of you. Tanya, can we get that video pulled up?
By the way, you know, this is my first interview using this.
Oh, yeah? Well, we're going to have you back.
Yeah.
President Trump escalates his feud with Puerto Rico's leader, tweeting, quote, FEMA and the military worked emergency miracles, but politicians like the crazed and incompetent mayor of San Juan have done such a poor job of bringing the island back to health. Well, out front now, the San Juan mayor, Carmen Yulín Cruz. And Mayor Cruz, thank you very much. So I would be remiss if I didn't start with the president here. He calls you crazed and incompetent. Your response?
Look, the president lives in an alternative world where he tries to pin people against one another. I guess it's easier for him to try and put me down. He cannot. You know, Eleanor Roosevelt used to say, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. Well, Mr. President, we don't consent. You are worthy of being president. You don't know what you're talking about. You continue to lie and you continue to mistreat people. And that's just the way you do policy. One of the things, Ern, if he doesn't get his way, he'll throw a little temper tantrum and he will just try and ditch anybody he can. He did it a few weeks ago. When he couldn't get the money for the border, he left 800,000 federal employees without the ability to take food to their families. That's exactly what he's doing to Puerto Rico. 1.3 million Puerto Ricans need some sort of food stamp assistance to put food on the table. Out of that, 45% are children, elderly, and disabled citizens. It is remarkable that the president cannot understand that he's gotten this all wrong.
That was almost 3 years ago.
It's deja vu. It's deja vu. That's exactly what he is today. What he's doing, it's remarkable. While people are dying, he's playing golf. The same thing that he did while we were up to our hips with water with human excrement. He is tooting his own horn. And I don't know why somebody would toot their own horn during a crisis. Never what you do is enough during a crisis. If you saved 1,000 people, you should have saved 2,000. If you gave $1 million, you should have given $200 million. And right now, let me finish with these two things. There is a growing number of mayors in the United States, and I want to join them and unite my voice to them, saying that the next group of aid that comes needs to come directly to the cities. Out of the $2,200 million that Wanda Vasquez got, the Puerto Rican governor, on the CARES Act, she only has said that 100 million will be distributed to municipalities. Out of 2.2 billion, only 100 million will be distributed to municipalities. That is just weaponizing, and we have to be careful. Weaponizing and politicizing aid.
Oh no. Oh, we lost Carmen? Oh, shoot. Okay. Yulin, if you can hear me by any chance, just come on so we could finish. Okay. Yulin, let me type. Let's see. So we could, no. Okay, we're gonna just wait a second or two. Technical things happen. And we have some feedback. So unfortunately, we now know where it's coming from. So I'm not able to continue to Instagram live, but everybody who's watching now, please go to Facebook or Periscope to watch us, because there's a sound above where I live and it's messing with the audio, and we want audio to be clear. But thank you, everybody. Just go on Facebook. Okay. I just got a text from Yulin. Her computer died, battery charger. So first I'm gonna make sure the sound right now, that there's no feedback. And what just happened is that Yulin's computer died, no battery charge. So we'll see if she's able to come up, and we'll wait for Marta Moreno Vega to come up. But the last thing Yulin was talking about before her computer died was about the response from Trump, and how it was an indicator to how he would react to now this pandemic that we're in. And I know that if we can't get Yulin right now, at least this is saved on YouTube and Facebook, and we'll bring her back, So Marta should be calling in. While that's happening, let me just let you know that Again, this is Disrupt the Chaos. We're here Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays from 7 p.m. until I finish. Because, look, most of us are home. Things don't have to be an hour. Sometimes there'll be 2 hours. Who wants to watch it, wants to watch it. But, we really have gotten so much amazing feedback and responses from everybody who's been watching that, if you have anything to donate, you can go to my website, crosaclemente.net, and donate some money as we look for some more sponsorships. This is a 2-woman operation. It is I and the executive producer right now, Tandi, and we need more people. We want to hire somebody for social media, and all of that takes money. So if you can, no obligation, but definitely go to my site and donate. And we're just grateful for our sponsors right now. Youth FX, that is based here in Albany, New York. V-Day, the movement to end violence against women and girls that Eve Ensler founded, and as well as Mokara, the Museum of Contemporary African Diasporic Arts, based in Brooklyn, New York. And we're going to go to the Marta clip before we bring her on. And look, perfect timing. Perfect timing. But yeah, Tani, Marta's on, so let's bring her on and show the clip. And Yulín, if you hear me, we'll bring you back. We'll figure it out. Thank you for being on the show. And that's not how we wanted it to end, but we'll get you back on as soon as possible, even if we have to do something on Friday or something to make sure that we complete the interview that so many people were liking and commenting on.
Then I said, how did it start? Where does it come from? So I'd like to dedicate today to my family. My mom and dad, who came from Puerto Rico separately, not knowing each other, and met in El Barrio. So El Barrio becomes an institution for me because it's where I grew up, where my parents bore 3 children, where my grandmother, Luisa Palacio, brought 3 men, 3 sons from Puerto Rico, straight racism. So I'd like to introduce you. Flora Cruz Marcano, who had dreams of being a nurse, and because Puerto Rico is still a colony of the United States, wasn't able to pursue her dreams in the early 20s. My father, with a 3rd grade education, came as an Afro-Boricua Black man to New York, to El Barrio. And New York didn't know about Puerto Ricans, so they couldn't understand a Black man speaking Spanish, right? So that when he tried to use his skills that he had learned being being mentored by a carpenter, he wasn't able to work with his hands because they thought he came as a janitor, right? And there's nothing wrong with being a janitor, but it was the inability for him to pursue what he had learned in Puerto Rico. El Barrio, for those of you who don't know East Harlem, is around 99th Street up to 5th Avenue to about 125th Street. And this is something that my mother instilled in us. That if we were going to live in the world, if we were going to have a place in the world, we had to see ourselves in the other. That we could not live in this world, or I could not live in this world without finding a place. And how was I to find a place in this world? Was to define myself, not only in terms of my color and my culture, but also in terms of my spiritual journey. El Barrio, and the slides are out of order, but it's okay. El Barrio, for my grandmother, who was a spiritist. On television now they call him a medium or a channeler. But she was a spiritist. She was a healer with her hands. In El Barrio, she went to La Marqueta and bought healing plants and knew the medicinal properties of healing plants. So the sister talking about Ecuador is absolutely on point because plants heal. And she had the power to heal not only with her hands, but the knowledge of plants and their medicine.
Just Google it. Look, I'm going to talk about how much I love her. And she's going to say, all of you are powerful in your own right. And then I'm going to say, no, but you did it. And when I mean that she did it, there are very few institutions in the entire United States of America that were created, founded, and have strived like the Caribbean Cultural Center African Diasporic Institute. And now that it's in East Harlem, I always tell people, you have to understand what it means to build an institution, but maintain it for over 50 years, you know? And I think we have to, like in hip hop, we have to big that up more. There's not a lot of women of color, particularly Afro-Boricua, African descendant women anywhere in this country that not only founded an institution, but continue to ground it in the community, you know? And the thing about that's so powerful about Marta for me is that when I was beginning to find my identity by going to college in my sophomore and junior year, I began to read more about Puerto Rico, and I would have conversations with my dad, and he's like, yeah, this and that. And I'm like, well, why didn't you tell us that when we were growing up? And he's like, oh, you know, it's just, that's how it was. And you go to college now, you know. And the thing I also love about Marta is when you're wrong, she'll tell you you're wrong. And she'll be like, don't mess up again, because I'm watching you.
Why that goal?
So there's a whole biography of her, but to me, she's my second mother. She's the one that's like, girl, you are not a PhD. You're ABD. And I'm like, I know. Why do I have to do this? But what is always I remember, Marta, is when you were in your PhD program, running an institution, having your family, traveling around the country. We were at one event together somewhere in upstate. And I was like, let's hang out. And you're like, I'm going to finish a chapter tonight. And you did, right? So you were like, I'm right.
There was a deadline.
There was a deadline that you were not going to miss. So first of all, thank you. And Marta's coming from Louisa because, of course, even though she, quote, retired,
I never said I retired. I said I was going on to my next chapter. So.
No, you're right. You're right. My next chapter includes starting 2 more organizations in Louisa, Puerto Rico, the African descendant community in Puerto Rico. And just so like, we have to be real about what's happening right now. And when we were on a call about 3 weeks ago, Marta, the thing that really stuck with me was when you said, we're already in fascism. What are we going to do about it? Because we're not doing what we need to be doing about it.
Well, I mean, we all know that we're headed to a dictatorship. I mean, the question is, how do we stop it? And I think that the conversations and the way people are contextualizing the conversation is still with surprise at what's happening by the administration, right? It's surprise that 45 is acting a certain way, that, the Department of Justice is acting a certain way, that the Republicans are acting. What more do you need, right? It's outlined. It was outlined from the very beginning. He didn't lie at the very beginning and say, I was going to be good and I was going to help you. He was very clear as to what he was doing. Bannon was very clear as to what the scheme was, right? And when you see departments being headed by people who are not expert in those areas, right? That was the first sign of saying, like, what? How do you put people in charge of departments that have no expertise in those departments? That means the purposeful destruction of government as it is. So that the press and the pundits acting with all this surprise, it's 8 o'clock. Surprised that he's, playing golf when 100,000 people have died, should not be a surprise. So we're contextualizing this person and this government in a way that we shouldn't. We're looking through a film that we have to destroy and really look at what's happening, right? We understand the disparity that's happening within our communities. We understand that our death is imminent if we don't stand up and understand that we're not getting the services that we need. And this false illusion of people being essential, when 3 months ago, people weren't thinking about delivery men and women. We're not thinking about nail people or hairdressers as being essential. All of a sudden, they become essential. They become essential because the economy is not running. And I'm not an economist. I'm not a politician. But, you know, there's a level of critical thinking and critical analysis that we have to do as a people and create a narrative that our people understand that they should not go to die. They should not go to die for a government that doesn't give two damns about them, right?
Yeah.
Yulin's statement was absolutely correct, right? That was the model of action that is being replicated throughout the United States, right?
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, when we talked earlier and we were talking about the George Floyd case and, you know, you've seen this happen for almost 50 years. And there's always
it happened since enslavement.
Right.
We've seen it, we were lynchings, right? The 60s were the civil rights movement. We saw it there when people stood up. And the question becomes, when are people going to stand up? I was part of a conference yesterday and we talked about this a little bit about Marcus Garvey. The movement that Marcus Garvey put together was a people's movement that drew millions of people, not hundreds of people, millions of people, because we got our own communities to stand up. And I'm not talking about the Jamaican community. I'm not talking about the African-American community or the Cuban community. He got a global community of African descendants to stand up, right? And government does, when it gets frightened of powerful people threatening it, he was deported, right? With trumped up charges, excuse the pun, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it happened to Malcolm. It happened, you know, as soon as people started following this leadership, right, that was providing critical analysis and explaining what was happening to our communities, they were blown away. And that was not a mistake. And it isn't a mistake. And we know that. So that somehow we have to talk truth to ourselves and understand what the truth is and what we're willing to do to move upon our own self-interest and our own survival right now.
What was that, you know, because you, in talking about Marcus Garvey, so many people don't know that he was exiled from this country and he died on a bench in London reading a book and someone found him and you think, how did this happen? But when you were here in East Harlem and you were teaching and at the same time finding El Museo del Barrio, what was the moment where you said, or you thought to yourself, we have to do for ourselves, we cannot depend on other people to accept us, and the work is cultural and political?
Well, one, I'm not the founder of El Museo del Barrio. Actually, Ralph Ortiz is the founder of El Museo del Barrio. I'm the second director. And the process was one of historical education. If we read our history and we read it critically, right? And we see what has happened to us as a people. We see it. You know, I just got a video that a friend sent on racism in China, right? Because, you know, the Chinese are in Africa. So it's a global phenomenon. Marcus Garvey understood racism is not a US phenomenon. It's a global phenomenon, right? And when we went to South Africa to look at world racism, we understood, right? All of us understood how entrenched it is in all communities, because we run the economies in most places.
Right.
Right? So that if we're not present, the economy doesn't run. And this is what's happening right now. They're saying, go back to work. Who's going back to work? Who are they supposed to go back to work? Black and brown, if you want to use that terminology. Us.
Us, yeah. And also,
right? We run the economy. If the economy is not going to run if we're not there, if we don't roll with it. So what if we decided, and I've said this hundreds of times and I'll say it again, what if we decided, all of us, to take a day vacation and make the economy stop totally, not in parts, not open in part, but not appear. Right? If we're invisible, if we don't count, then don't go. Don't participate and see what happens.
Yeah,
we don't understand our own worth. We don't understand our own worth. We're always comparing ourselves to others.
Right.
You know what I mean? When the brilliance of us is just in the reality that we survived. Just in the reality that we have survived.
When you say that, it reminds me of a couple moments. When I first met you, you had come to speak at the University of Albany, and I went up to you and I'm like, I want to know everything. And you gave me a list of 5 books, and then you were like, call me after you read those 5 books. And I did. And at that time, one of my comrades, one of your mentees, Lumumba Bandeli, was working at the center, and you would all come up during the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus weekend that happens here the second weekend every February. And that year I happened to become an intern for Roger Green. So I began to see things, and I would see you and talk to Lumumba, get politicized. But I think one day we were at an event and I was like, they don't want to hear me, you know, like they don't like me. And you're like, you can't worry about that. You do what you know you need to do. And I understand that now more fully than ever, because if you didn't have that philosophy and pass it on to us, but if you didn't have it, you wouldn't have been able to build the institutions that you have, because nobody was trying to give Black and Latinx institutions money. And you were there on those weekends saying, no, culture is part of a budget of a city and we will not be left out.
No, we pay taxes, you know, and we don't value what we pay into the system and don't demand what we put into it back. Right? And and we think that whatever we get is a handout, and it's not. Right? And here is again why we don't value who we are and what we represent. Right? Because if you pay taxes, immigrants pay taxes, and I hate the word immigrants, right? Because we're a global citizen nation. But the reality is we pay taxes. We don't get back what we put into the system, right? We don't. And we know we don't. And we keep putting into the system. So why should we value a system that doesn't value us? And that's a very simple lesson, because that's what my mama told me. You don't need anybody to love you. I love you. Your daddy loves you. Your brother and your sister love you. Nobody else needs to love you.
That's definitely a Boricua mom, because my mom would say this. In fact, she's like, I don't need friends. I have you and my sisters. And because I was always that person kind of searching and insecure and like, I want to be able to say what I want to say, but I want to have friends. And, you know, my mom one day was like, you got your family. You have people that love you, and also people that will tell you the truth, you know. And I think for so many of us, you are always that person that is like, let us look at this, but also let us ground it in a historical narrative that does not just begin with occupation of our people, but all we had before occupation and post occupation, all we continue to create. So now that you're, you know, in Luisa, Puerto Rico, and you've been creating this institution, and now we're in this moment of this global pandemic, what would be a couple lessons that we need to know still? Because there's something not connecting right now. I feel that with the social distancing, it's exactly the opposite of what we do as organizers and what we've been taught. And I wonder how you've been.
It's physical distance.
Yeah. How are you? What's the advice on that? Or what are you seeing? That physical.
Well, I mean, again, let's not use terminology that skews things for us, right? And language is very important, and words are very important because they have their impact in your psyche, right? And in the way you act. We're physically distant. We're not socially distant, right? Because we pick up a phone and we talk to our mom, to our grandchildren, you know, and so on and so forth. We're physically distant, and that's hard. I'm not saying it's not hard, but it's not socially different. And the love that you have for your people, the friendship that you have for your people, the connections you have for your people, you continue to have in a different way. The question becomes, how do you protect you and how do you protect them, right? You have that with Justice. He's a Black man, right? I have 2 Black sons. I have a nephew, Javon, you know, and my concern is that they live, right? Right now, we're all concerned that we live. So that we have to make sure that we do what is necessary, put the mask on, you know, stay distance apart. You know, the doctors are saying it, that we're not doing it or people are not doing it. That's on them, right? Because we have at least 3 steps. Distance, put a mask on, and keep your hands clean, you know, and keep yourself clean. So we have to do it, you know, and at this moment, my son says, "Man, I don't care what conspiracy theory you have on this pandemic, but people are dying." And that's the key. People are dying. So you have to protect yourself from dying. Right? Yeah, and I think the build, you know, I'm here and, you know, things evolve. I'm not building an institution by myself. It's with Maricruz Clemente, who is the creator of OPI. We developed a partnership to develop Corredor Afro. And creative justice I had developed when I left the Caribbean Cultural Center when I phased out. And I absolutely developed it because I saw the destruction of what was happening with this new administration that's now 2.5 or 3 years old, right? You saw the lies. You saw the overt racism and the use of racial language to victimize the people. And I said, you know, like a group of us said, you know, we need to react to this. We need to understand it and talk about it and what happens to us under this administration. You know, it's a continuity of the Reagan administration, but at a higher level of destruction and hate. And you're seeing it. You're seeing it, the way people are acting, you know. I would say, think a minute. A group of men, white men, went into a governor's building with guns. Nothing happened to them. Imagine if Black men would have gone in. Imagine if Latino men would have gone in. Imagine if Black women would have gone in. Imagine if Latina women would have gone in. Who would have remained standing? Please.
I mean, we're seeing that yesterday with this George Floyd that was murdered, and we've seen so many videos and it's been so traumatic for so many people. But what I was thinking about this morning was, wait, there were also people watching it and you could hear them. Where like in some of the other cases with Eric Garner, you might hear one person, but in this one, and in fact, they just released some footage from another restaurant where it shows about like 15 or 20 people, like, stop it, stop, you're killing them, stop it. And me and Justice were talking, Justice is my husband, but we were talking and he said, would we be the people to stop it? And I go, we think we would be the people? But we also know that if one of those people had tried to stop it, all of those people could have died by gunfire. And
yeah, because the question becomes, would we have stopped it? But we are those people.
Right.
And then look at the 30 but we're not apart from that. It could have been my child, my son. Yeah. It could have been my nephew. It could have been your husband.
Yeah.
And that's why we have to internalize. It's not happening to somebody else. It's happening to us.
And our daughters.
Children.
And right? Our daughters
it's happening to us. We're in it. So that, you know, how does one deal with that? And the fact that that's why I say the fact that we have survived, right, is because of intelligence, brilliance, and being able to shift to survive. But it's not because we're supposed to survive. So then the question becomes, what do we do at this point as a people, right? To assure us the survival of our future generations. Because they're saying, send your kids to school with no guidelines, with no real guidelines and no real solutions or vaccinations to protect them, right? So parents have to be very aware of the decisions they make in terms of sending their children to school.
Which is such a hard decision, because I always feel like as an organizer, I'm like, I'm ready. I'm down for the revolution. I would homeschool. And after 2 days, I was like, yeah, I can't do this homeschool thing. Like, you know, and then you think about the teachers who were not, one day they're with their students and the next day they're not, but now they're expected to be productive and overperform in their homes while their kids are home, or the children or guardians. And I mean, as someone who grew up to be a teacher and know teachers, I know how much we love our students, but I said, this homeschooling thing that people think, oh yeah, you're just fine, you'll teach the kids. I was also thinking, you know, that we've seen so many of our young daughters and trans and queer folks that have now also been encompassed with this police brutality and violence. And I feel like, I think of Alicia, who's 15, and some of our other, everybody in our crew who has sons or daughters or non-gender conforming people or children. And Alicia said to me, the planet is dying. We're in a global pandemic. What is happening? We have no future. You know, and how did you talk to your sons or your granddaughter about where we're at right now? Because it's so difficult, because you feel as an organizer and you pass it on to your child that they would be okay. But this mental health and, as you said, physically distance is really impacting them.
Well, it's impacting us all. I mean, you know, we would be remiss to say that it's not impacting us. Of course it's impacting us. Just the idea that I can't get on a plane and see my granddaughter or my sons and so on and so forth, of course it's impactful. But the reality is you have to deal with what you're going through. You have to, you know, and you have to be realistic in what you're going through. She's going to have a future because you're going to assure that she has a future. We've had it rough before and we have survived it. The question is, how do we protect our children and have them critically think of the steps that they need to take to inform their future? And if we're not having those critical conversations as to what this change means, and maybe how we have to shift the definition of school, how we have to shift the definition of how we work, right? And how we function in our homes. If we don't have those critical conversations, then yeah, we're doomed, right? Because you're depending on somebody to figure it out for you. You're not figuring it out for yourself, right? Yeah. So the self-reliance piece and the critical piece of, you know, like people say, oh, we're poor. No, we're not poor. We can look at other people in other countries that, you know, are economically poorer, right? And have no subsistence, have no assistance. And I'm not saying that the system is right, the system is good, but there are opportunities that one has to build upon and access and work with in order to survive. And not only survive, but thrive. I mean, the building of institutions is not because I'm crazy, right? Because it's been hard. Of course it's been hard. But the reality is that if we don't have our institutions to educate, if we don't have our institutions to give a different framework, right? All you have is a system that works against you, thinking that works against you. The schools haven't been great. You know, you've had to fight to find a school for Alicia, right? To thrive in.
Yeah.
I did the same thing when my kids were small. I had to find the school because the school in the corner, right, was not preparing them for a future. So what are we doing now? We're finding ways of preparing them and finding those places. And we have institutions now. And we have to make those institutions that we build work to help our kids and help our future and design a future in our narrative, not in somebody else's narrative. Because somebody else's narrative is going to be for them. It's not going to be for you.
Yeah, and that to me has always been the most important lesson that you have to do for yourself, or not for yourself, but for your community. And you're going to have to deal with some hard knocks and get right back up. I would be remiss, of course, if we didn't talk a little bit about, well, Afro-Latinx, Afro-Puerto Rican, African descendants, but you know, I've actually been so happy the last 5 years, particularly with a younger generation of Afro-Latino, Latinx people that are saying, yes, I am a person of African descent. It's not just my hair or my food. This is not only my DNA and my legacy, but you and people like Carlos Moore and Humberto Brown and the young lords with their platform. But really, you three for me are like that triangular effect of what it means to claim and not be ashamed to say, okay, well, Elise is a Black Puerto Rican. I'm a Black Puerto Rican. I'm an African descendant, because really I had never heard that terminology till I saw you speak at my college. Obviously, for me, I grew up with a family that's redhead, blue-eyed, all the way to my dad, you know, that is Black. Have you been pleased to see more and more younger people coming to that identity, and what might be something to move it more forward, that it's not just culture without politics or politics without culture?
It has to be both. That's the purpose of it, right? And if we look at, you know, the model of Garvey, you know, and that's what we were talking about, he understood that we are a spiritual people. Historically, we are a spiritual people. The denomination of what you are doesn't matter, right? You are a spiritual people. And that spiritual people have to see themselves in the political structure that they frame. So he was brilliant. What he did was say the Bible, God is Black, the Madonna is Black, Jesus is Black, everybody's Black in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
So that was what, you know, he was an expert marketer. What that did was resonate in people. That Bible, that godliness, that sacredness is us. That's us. That's not somebody else, right? And his politics was, hey, make it on earth, not in the afterlife, right? Because if you start thinking about it, the slave master was the one to say, work hard and get it on the afterlife. You're going to gain your goodness, right? For your hard work for me, a white person. I'm going to get that wealth and you'll get yours in the afterlife. No. So Garvey just simply said, no, you Black. The Bible is Black. You're sacred. Do it here. Because that's what the sacred wants. That Black God wants you to succeed here. And then you'll succeed as well in the afterlife. That's brilliant. That's the story, right? And that's the political story. Because I'm not talking about party politics. I'm talking about policies that are developed to influence how you think, how you move, and how you succeed in the world. And if you can do that, and if we can do that, and yes, we can, because others have done it in the past, and we need to think about doing that. You know, I know that 45 hates me and my people and my family. I know that. Everybody knows that. Why are we going to question it? You know, and he represents a whole cadre of people that don't like us and don't care for us and don't want us to do well, because if we do well, they can't do well. So why are we questioning it?
Right.
You know, so that we need to think critically in terms of what steps we're going to take for our future, because I have a granddaughter who's 2.5 and she has a future, because we're going to make a future for her. And we're going to make a future for Alicia and all of our babies.
Yeah. And that's how I believe that's a big lesson that you taught so many of us, to not react to what the system does, but to build and fortify ourselves. So before I let you go, I wonder sometimes when you're walking in East Harlem and you go past the Caribbean Cultural Center, do you sometimes just look and go, I did that? Not by myself, but that's going to be here after I'm not here.
You
Just
know,
a little bit.
very interesting, because I'm not a person that looks to the past, right? And I'm about history, you know. The proudest I feel about it is not only that it continues, but that my niece is the director.
I know.
Right? So she grew up at my side with her mom, Laura, you know, who was my right hand, my assistant director. And to see that legacy be passed on and continue. And the other day I saw a video that Kailani had put on in the work she's doing in Harlem on social justice and I know there's a term for it, which is going on. And like I told Melody, I said, comment on it, because you know how proud our parents would be to know that what they planted in their barrio continues into generations. And that's how we have to think about generations, right? Generations that we develop to sustain us and to continue the work that we're doing. So that to have like Melody and now Kailani and whatever baby that Kailani has, you know what I'm saying? That's what we need to build within our communities.
And so many of us, me, Alicia, Justice, Lumumba, Monifa, Dasa, Naima, Malik, Mari Nieves, Solomon, Nyoka, you know, it's just like, I think there's been one time where we were all together at some event, and I have a picture of it, and I look at it and I'm like, that's power. You know, that's legacy. So before we want to just bring up, look, not only does Dr. Vega do incredible work, she also produces films and she writes books, like 3 or 4 of them. I have 3. Well, the first one I think was The Altar of My Soul.
Yeah.
Then When the Spirits Dance Mambo.
Yeah.
And then the one that you and Yvette Modestine and Mari Neves Alba co-edited, Woman Warriors. And I actually know there's a 4th one about cultural, I can't remember the words, but I was like, I can't find it today.
It's what's it, Battlefront
of Culture.
Battlefront.
Yeah.
And that was a result of a conference we did, and now we're redoing the conference, calling it Culture, Race, Myth, Art, and Justice. And it was built around actually doing the conference around the Reagan era. Because remember, he was fighting to destroy the National Endowment for the Arts, fund the arts, right? Because the Reagan administration understood that to kill culture, to kill the artists, right, is to kill creative thought, right? Because the artist is a person who breaks barriers. And I'm not saying only visual artists or theater artists. I'm saying people who are creative, barrier breakers, right? So that Reagan was trying to destroy all those institutions that supported the arts. This is what the present administration is trying to do. When they talked about bombing other countries, they talked about destroying cultural treasures.
Right, first.
So that we're bringing together young activists as well as the elder activists to have this conversation to make sure that what we did as part of that process gets passed on to the new generation of activists.
And right before we came on, as we close out with Dr. Vega, you could follow Marta on Facebook, at her website. She's very active. She posts the most beautiful pictures every day from Puerto Rico. And I'm like, why are we still here? Like, if we're going to go down, let's go down in Puerto Rico, giving it all we got, you know? But right before we came on, apparently 45 is trying to push an executive order now that will limit social media because he's upset about Twitter or some crazy rant that he went in. And I really want people to be critically aware of what you've been saying since he has come into office with all his co-conspirators, what I call them a criminal syndicate of every right that they're trying to take right now. And, you know, I think as organizers, sometimes we're like, well, we're always fighting the battle. And I'm like, no, this dude is an extra special psychopathic maniac. And
trying
we
to
have to fight it.
suppress anything, any
Everything.
media that does not support him, he's going to try to quell.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Marta, thank you so much. I love you. I'm so glad that you're in Luisa, Puerto Rico, and safe. And, you know, the one thing that was great when I went with the crew to cover after Hurricane Maria is when we went to Luisa, they were the municipality that was already rebuilding. And one of the sisters there, her name is Sasha. She was the director or is of the Boys and Girls Club. Yeah. And she said, we've been fighting our own government for a while, so we were all ready for this. And when we were in Luisa, she had also told me that they had done pre-surveys of every household and what they would need after the hurricane. So going from like Isla Verde and Old San Juan, then going to Luisa, where the community was just rebuilding, building with the kids, already had the food, the medicines that they needed. I was like, right, this is what mutual aid looks like. And there's so many great organizations. So anybody, not only look at Marta's work there, Dr. Vega's work, but there's 2 great organizations also in Luisa. Which
and I think that you know, when you talk about young people, you have to see what the young people are doing here. I mean, this is the salvation of Puerto Rico, because people are not looking at government. They're looking at taking on issues and building government apart from government, right?
Yeah.
And government for the people, not, you know, being imposed on the people. So that the young people here are absolutely astronomical.
Yeah.
And we need to see that happening in other places like the United States and throughout the United States.
Yeah, I mean, the mutual aid work post Maria in Puerto Rico has been incredible, because as one of the brothers, he recently got arrested at the May Day protest. His name is Giovanni. When we got there, he said, look, we're not just giving people food. We're building with our community. We're not a charity. And I was like, right, you know, and I think Puerto Rico right now has become an example for people in Jackson, Mississippi, with Cooperation Jackson and all over the world. And one of the things I was reading today is that cooperative economics is the economic system that is working right now, which really now lays bare how horrific capitalism has been. And it's here, and we should be done with everything we could reform capitalism and go
we have the models within us that are working almost naturally. The bartering system, you know, I never planted anything in my life. I'm planting, you know what I'm saying? So I think that the answers are within us. We just haven't taken the time to put those threads together. And I think that now that the diaspora and Puerto Rico have united in a very sort of co-production way, in a co-help way, in a co-existing way, that there's an answer there.
Well, look, I thank you for your time. Thank you for your work, for your mentorship, for your love, your tough love. You're wanting to dance.
Come on now.
Just a little bit, but that's okay. We need it. But also, I know anytime I'm in a room with you, we could dance too. So, you know, I love that you love to have fun. You know, I think that's one of the things I've learned most about you, is that if you are not expressing joy in the work that you're doing, why would other people want to do that work? So I love you.
I love you.
Thank you for being here. I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you.
Okay.
Love you.
Love you. You know, in the midst of tragedy, then there's light and brightness. So we wanted to end today's show with what is happening with one of our elders, a political prisoner. We talked about him yesterday, Yulin Muntekin. The fight to get him released is really growing very quickly. So this is our brother, almost 50 years he has been imprisoned. I'm going to read a little bit about him and then talk about what we need you all to do all day tomorrow. Widely respected elder Yulin Muntekin, who in his teens joined the Black Panther Party and who was convicted at 19 and has been incarcerated for 49 years in New York State prisons on a 25-year minimum sentence, which means he should have been out 25 years ago, became ill last week and has tested positive for COVID-19. His health has deteriorated over this weekend, and he's been hospitalized since Monday. For months, public health experts, faith leaders, Congress members, and hundreds of others have warned New York State officials that the prisons are potential death traps in the COVID-19 pandemic. Recognizing this, a New York State judge on April 27th ordered Jalil's temporary release from Sullivan Correctional Facility in Fallsburg, New York, based on his extreme vulnerability to the virus. Jalil is 68 years old and suffers from serious chronic health conditions. However, New York State Attorney General Letitia James, a Black woman who's in office because other progressive Black people voted her into that office, will hear oral arguments, appeal the ruling. So essentially, Letitia James blocked Jalil's release and is forcing him to remain in prison and also in handcuffs at a medical facility right where I'm at right now in Albany, New York. But tomorrow, May 28th, a New York State Court of Appeals will hear oral arguments from Jalil's attorney and the DOCCS attorney. Tomorrow will be a Twitter storm and a call storm. We ask you to call and tweet the AG and DOCS commissioner today and all day tomorrow, urging them to withdraw the appeal so that Jalil can be released from the hospital to his community where he has medical and other support awaiting him. So for right now, please Google Jalil Muntekin. Tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern time, we will be packing the virtual courtroom where this hearing will happen. We have the information right here. Tandi's strolling right for us perfectly. And look, 1 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, 10 a.m. Pacific time. As an organizer and someone that has been politically trained within the Malcolm X grassroots movement and other movements, we always say that we cannot leave anyone behind. I really need people to think about what it means to spend almost 50 years behind a wall, being transported to almost every system within the New York State correctional web, and to also understand that Jalil has gotten 2 bachelors. He has done programming the entire time he's been at any facility, and that the governor Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo here, who for some reason everybody thinks is the great white hope outside of New York State, has not released one incarcerated person to this day. But for me, my anger is not really at Cuomo because I don't ever trust white men in power to save or free us. I'm very angry at the Attorney General. I don't understand how, as a Black woman, Latina woman, whoever we are as Black and brown women, non-gender conforming people or men, the only reason some of you even have these positions is because of the sacrifice of political prisoners. And when I mean the sacrifice not only to their lives, but their families' lives. Jalil, Leonard Peltier, David Gilbert, all that are still political prisoners incarcerated, literally gave up their lives so that we could be free. It would be a travesty if we do not all pack that virtual courtroom tomorrow, let our voices be heard, and demand, just as Minneapolis protesters right now and in LA and all over this country are demanding justice for George Floyd, at the same time, we have to demand freedom for Jalil Muntekin. So everybody's home. You have to physically distance. We will share the information, or you can just look on this again. I'll leave it up, screenshot it. You can also write to Jalil right here. He eventually will get that. there's no reason that by tomorrow or Friday that we will not be reporting that Yulin Muntekin has been released and is on his road to health and will able to live the rest of his life outside the walls because of the sacrifices he made for us. So we thank you again. I told everybody from the beginning, this is not going to be a typical 57-minute show. Sometimes we'll go 2 hours, sometimes we'll go 45 minutes. But, you know, we're doing this in concert with two other people that two other shows I want to really bring up. We talk a lot about the media narrative, never really including us. And for a long time, and we still have Pacifica Radio, which I think is great, and the Real News Network and some other spots, The Intercept and places like that. Majority of those left progressive media outlets are still overwhelmingly white and overwhelmingly lack women of color, right? So if we want our narrative, if we want our history to be told, then freedom is not always free, fam. Like, we have to not only do this show continuously, support the work of Dr. Jared Ball at I Mix What I Like, listen to Davey D on Pacifica, listen to Kat Brooks on Pacifica, listen to the Renegade podcast by Kamal Franklin and Kalanji Changa, listen to so many independent media journalists like me who don't say we're objective. I am very subjective. And what I mean is my reporting will always center the voices of our people, period, and unapologetically. So we have to support all of this independent media that is out there already, the ecosystem that is out there. We all need to support each other. But I hope that I see a lot of people tomorrow, again, in that virtual courtroom where we demand the immediate release of our political prisoner, prisoner of war, our freedom fighter, Yulin Muntekin. Check us out. Like I said, go to rosaclemente.net if you want to donate something. Hit me up if you want to sponsor the show. All my social medias, Rosa Clemente, and to the executive producer, Thandi, who's out in LA. Thank you so much. You know, we're going to grow this team. We're going to continue to really center what we are calling, or Jared Ball has said, journalism that emancipates, or freedom journalism. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe, stay up, stay healthy. We'll see you tomorrow night.
They don't want you to know the truth.